Hey everybody, Andrew Newland here with newtography.com and fstoplounge.com. So today I'm going to be doing my very first mirrorless camera review. Yeah, I know, exciting, right? So we have here my first mirrorless camera, the Samsung Smart Camera NX300. This is the kit with the 18-55 OIS lens. And I am really excited to review this thing because it freaking blew me away, I'm not gonna lie. So if you're not familiar with mirrorless cameras, basically it's gonna be the same picture quality you're gonna get from a DSLR, just in a much smaller, more discreet package, usually packed with a lot more technology than you would find in any DSLR on a consumer level. Well, the newer ones are kind of coming out with more stuff, but these things are packed full of technology and they're small and discreet, which is great for like a grab and go situation. But if you are familiar with mirrorless cameras, then you can tell by the title of this video that the one I went with is not one of the more popular mirrorless cameras on the market. I was just on a really tight budget and I was actually really blown away by what all I got for such a great price. So if you guys are ready, we will start with the unboxing.
Alright, so we got the box. Check out the back side. I got Usain Bolt doing some cool stuff here. Some standard promo material. 20.3 megapixels full HD, 1/6000th of a second, yada yada. Let's get this bad boy opened up. Here we go. Strip the tape, hold the camera in one hand. I really need an assistant. Oh, we got it out. Alright, cool. So, one box. Psych. Here we go. We got some compact discs, little Lightroom, and some drivers, instruction manuals, and that sort of thing. You know, standard issue stuff here. Now, what's next? Let's open the small package first, pull it out. Looks like we have a Samsung neck strap, and I will say that this neck strap is fantastic. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Little Samsung branding there. What else we got in here? We have our standard micro USB for charging and data transfers. Standard issue battery. Talk about that in a little bit. Also comes with charger, a USB outlet charger. And then, don't let me drop it, got a little flash. They give you a little flash to include, a little hot shoe flash to throw in there since it doesn't have a built-in one. Now then, as you can see, it's not really anything fancy, but it does work pretty well. Nice of them to throw that in there for us. A little carrying case. Reminds me of old Game Boy games. Ooh, what do we got here? The 18-55 OIS lens. Take a look at this bad boy. Get it out of the bubble wrapping and with one hand. That's talent right there. Samsung branding. What a beautiful piece of kit right here. 18-55. Nice little lens caps on both sides. Now, lens hood. Standard pedal lens hood. What do we have here? Let's try and not drop it. Wait for it. Alright, good deal. The Samsung NX300. What a beautiful little vintage leather and brushed aluminum body. That is a pretty little camera, if I do say so myself.
Alright, so let me share with you some of the reasons that I got this camera. Now, to be honest, the main reason was the price point. I had some Amazon gift cards that I've been collecting for a while that were about $500, and so I was looking somewhere around the $500 price range. And since I wanted a mirrorless body and lens, that severely limited my options in that price range. And the reason that I really wanted a mirrorless was on an earlier trip to New York City this year. I spent a week there with my family on vacation, and every morning before we left to go out into the city, I found myself going through my bag and choosing various camera bodies and lenses, and I always seemed to choose the same body and lens. And that was just because I didn't want to be hauling around my giant backpack all day long and swapping lenses and stuff. I just wanted to have one camera on me, and it sucked that I was limited to that one lens and one camera. So I really wanted to have something that had a small line of lenses and a small camera body, but still pack the same punch. So that's specifically why I was looking for a mirrorless camera system. So, as I said, looking for a mirrorless camera system in the $500 range. The NX300 stood out dramatically from the rest of the cameras in that price range. Now, if you know me or you've seen any of my videos, you probably know that I shoot Nikon, but I'm really anything but brand loyal. Nikon has really kind of sucked in innovation lately, as many of the DSLR brands have. And so I just really wasn't impressed at what they were bringing to the market in the mirrorless department. But Nikon is known for their quality glass, so that's why I shoot Nikon in my professional photography with DSLRs. But they seem to be more DSLR focused, and that's fine. If that's the way they're making their money, they're doing a good job at it. I just, would like a little more innovation. But the end product has a lot less to do with what you're shooting on and a lot more to do with who's shooting it. I know photographers that use 10-year-old cameras that produce amazing images. And I also know photographers who have all the top-of-the-line equipment but couldn't shoot their way out of a wet paper bag, if that makes any sense. The camera is not what makes a good image. The camera is just a tool that helps a good photographer create great images. Now, the manufacturers all want you to think that it's the camera that's producing these great images, but just like a chef, you just hand some great oven to anybody and they're not going to be able to produce a masterpiece. You give an oven to a chef, they're going to make something brilliant. So while you're watching this review or any other review of any kind of camera gear, just keep in mind that you shouldn't expect any specific camera to make you a good photographer. Alright, now let's go over the reasons why I bought this camera and what really sold me on it. First of all, I've talked about a little bit, was the price point. You can get this camera with a 20 to 50 millimeter lens for $400. And if you want the 18 to 55 lens and a free copy of Adobe Photoshop Lightroom, then shell out an extra $100 and some change. $500–600, you can get a great camera with the best editing software there is on the market right now. And that's a pretty freaking good deal. So obviously the main selling point for me was the price. But aside from that, I really wanted Wi-Fi capability. And this thing has it. We've got the Wi-Fi knob here on the dial, and we also have a direct link button. We'll talk about the buttons more in a little bit. But this is basically my grab and go shoot, just mobile anywhere type of camera. I want to be able to get out there, shoot, and then wirelessly transmit the photos to this iPad so that I can edit and upload them online real quick in the field wherever I'm at. Now, I've played with a lot of mirrorless cameras that had the wireless built in like this. And I can say that none of them worked as flawlessly as this Samsung does. So that's probably because Samsung is obviously a major player in the mobile department, and they're really leading the pack when it comes to smart devices. So they've got amazing technology that they can take from the R&D and all those other fields and really implement it seamlessly here, and they've done just that. All right, so the next big plus is the screen. Now, I'm a huge fan of a tilting screen, but the one thing that I will say is that it only tilts down or up. So it does not have the multi-directional tilting that you see in a lot of the DSLRs now. But as long as I can tilt down and get a low perspective on something, that's all I'm really looking for. And then, if you want to tilt it up, tilt it down, get up above you for some shots, get in a crowd maybe, that's also really good. Now, it's not an LCD screen, it's actually an AMOLED screen, which is really, really bright, which is a good thing because if you're shooting in bright daylight, you're gonna need a really bright screen to be able to see it. Other than that, I'll say that the screen is 768K dot resolution, if that means anything to you, has 100% coverage, so everything you're seeing in the screen is what's gonna show up on your photo. And that's pretty much what you would expect from Samsung, which is one of the leading smartphone manufacturers. So a tilting screen is one of the main factors for me for purchasing this camera. I love having a tilting screen, which is pretty much common in consumer DSLRs and a lot of mirrorlesses nowadays. All right, now, aside from those three things, price point, tilting screen, and wireless connectivity, the other somewhat major thing for me was lens selection and styling. Now, I'm a big fan of the retro style that's kind of coming back, and I love that this thing was wrapped in brown leather with a brushed aluminum finish. And even though Samsung's not a big player in the mirrorless market, their lens selection was surprisingly big. They had 70% more lenses than the Sony E mount, which really blew me away. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, they have 36 lenses that are this NX mount that you can choose from. I mean, pretty much anything you would need. Wide angles, zooms, primes. I mean, they even have a 3D lens that has a dual shutter something or other inside it that allows it to capture 3D to this camera. All right, so, you know, I've kind of hyped this thing up, but a question that a lot of you probably have right now is that if this camera is so great, why is it not in the conversation with the other major players like Fuji and Olympus and Sony? And obviously that's a really good question. And my best guess would be that since Samsung has not been in the mirrorless market very long, then that would be the reason that they're just not being taken seriously right now. And I'm not one to jump on bandwagons and just go buy a mirrorless because of the name. I just really want to take great images. So as long as it can help me do that, then it's a great camera in my book. And boy, can it really do that. Let's take a deeper look into this camera and what all it offers. All right, now, the first thing you're gonna notice about this camera is the lack of a viewfinder. And that may be a big deal to you. And it's kind of one of the negative things that I could probably put against this camera, but since there's no physical mirror inside the camera, there's no real reason for the manufacturer to put a viewfinder in it. But I understand if you're used to looking through that viewfinder to get your shot, that could definitely be a downside for you. I don't require it, so it just wasn't that big of a deal for me. Most of my shots are fairly thought out and usually involve a tripod and me setting them up and setting to manual focus and using the LCD to make sure my subject is tack sharp. So there's kind of a negative for you if you want to do that, but this viewfinder has 100% coverage, so you're going to see everything you see in this viewfinder is going to show up in the picture, but there is no viewfinder, so we can put that against it if you want. Now after we get past that, we're going to see that this little thing is freaking jam-packed full of greatness, starting out with the autofocus. The camera has hybrid contrast and phase detection autofocus. It has 105 points of phase detection autofocus built into the sensor, as well as 247 points of contrast autofocus. So this thing is really at the top of its class in focusing speed. It is lightning fast. You pair that super fast autofocus with 1/6000th of a second as its maximum shutter speed, and you're gonna be doing some amazing sports photography. Now, I will say that I'll never get rid of my DSLR and high-end lenses for my sports photography because there's just something about seeing in real time what that lens is seeing and being able to click that shutter and immediately have the picture. But this thing does not have much lag, and with fast autofocus and a high shutter speed like that, I mean, I would definitely take this to my nephew's soccer games or something like that where it's not a paid gig and expect to get really great results out of it. All right, so let's talk about some of the key specs of this camera. It has an APS-C size sensor, which is in most consumer level DSLRs now, and it has an ISO range from 100 to 25,600 with insanely good high ISO noise reduction. And it's in a really compact size. The camera measures 4.8 inches by 2.5 inches by 1.6 inches width, height, and depth. It weighs just over 11.5 ounces, so you're getting a lot in this really small package. All right, let's take a second and talk about the onboard video on this camera. So it does 1080p recording at 60 frames a second, which is as good or better than most of the consumer DSLRs that are out right now. And one thing that it does very well is image stabilization. So it has optical image stabilization, which is within the lens, and that image stabilization on this little $400 camera is as good as having a DSLR and a Steadicam or a glide cam, which I've used in my video work quite a lot. So the image stabilization, like I said, is in the lens, so you need to have the Samsung OIS lenses to have that image stabilization enabled. And then one thing I can put against this camera is that it does not have the external mic input. Now for most people that's not going to be a big deal, you don't need that. For some people that is a big deal. If you're recording video, a lot of people like to have external audio. So I do most of my video work recording with DSLRs and stuff, and so I don't really have to worry about that. But you know, for some people that might be a big deal. But what I will say is that you can either use a lav mic, or the onboard audio on this thing seems to be incredible, and it has really great wind reduction mode. So as far as ergonomics and control go, I I really enjoy using this camera. I like that it has the grip on the right side so I can get a better handle on it. And if we take a look at the controls, it's pretty simple and to the point. You have your regular dial with your 4 basic modes here: program, aperture, shutter, and manual, as well as a fully automatic mode. The smart mode, which lets you pick the type of photo that you're taking, beauty, face, landscape, macro, etc. It enables the camera to adjust the settings better for you. Then it also has an eye mode. This is a lens priority mode. So basically, someone who's not familiar with how the aperture works, you kind of control the aperture from the lens. Basically, you press the I button here, and then it gives you a defocus or sharpen on the screen here. So you can plus to sharpen, and all that's really doing is lowering your aperture. Or you can go back over here to defocus. So that's just opening your aperture back up, giving you more depth of field. Now, if you get the lens that's equipped with the eye function, Samsung's made it possible to make all of your settings adjustable by just using the lens. So let's switch it into manual mode. Then once we have it in manual mode, we press the I button on the lens and my settings are going to pop up. And you can change them by using the manual focus ring on the lens. So we can go back and forth, press the I button again. I'm going to go to my shutter speed, go back and forth. You can change all of your settings from the lens, and that was a really cool feature that I hadn't seen before. And I find myself using that feature a lot more than just using the touch screen to adjust my settings. Now, the final mode on the dial is a Wi-Fi mode, which this gives us several options: mobile link, remote viewfinder, auto backup, email, SNS and cloud, and all share play. Now, I've only used the mobile link and the remote viewfinder mode so far, but they work absolutely perfectly. Now, you can only transfer JPEGs while using the mobile link, which is common with cameras with Wi-Fi built in. So this means that I have the camera set up to capture RAW and JPEGs to the memory card on every shot, which increases the processing time on the camera, but allows me to transfer JPEGs to my iPad when I'm out shooting, and also download the RAW images from the card and edit those on the computer when I have time. Now, the buttons are pretty standard. You have your on-off switch surrounding your shutter button here. The shutter has the half-press focus, full-press shutter release, pretty standard stuff. Then you have this jog wheel here. Below the jog wheel, it looks like it's a magnifier, which that's what it does in preview mode. This jog wheel allows for scrolling at any time that's applicable within the camera. The last button on top is a direct link button, which is customizable. It's set up for the Wi-Fi initially. And then on the back, we have the record button here, right at your thumb. This is where we record HD video. Then we have our aperture control button. You'll hold this down and throw the jog wheel around to change your aperture whenever you're in manual mode, as well as your other standard buttons here. Menu button to access the menus. You have a function button, which is customizable. Your preview button down here to get to your pictures. Review your photos. Delete button down here. These are all surrounding the multi-directional buttons, which are used as standard up, down, left, right, and OK buttons, as well as the display button, drive selection. You can select continuous shooting, standard, self-timer, autofocus, where you select your autofocus mode, and then also your ISO button, where you would select your ISO settings. Now, since it's a touch screen, you can do most of these things on the screen since they have the ability to show up there, as well as a few options that only show up on the screen. Now, also, this has touch autofocus, so it will focus where you touch on the screen. Now on to the very last thing that I have to complain about. Alright, so the camera does not have onboard flash, which, you know, I'm not a fan of flash personally unless it's off of the camera. But for those of you who enjoy blinding people, they do include, as you saw in the unboxing video, a little hot shoe flash with the camera that you can slide into the hot shoe here. Now, as far as other things go, there's only really one other thing that I can go over, which is the tripod mount on the bottom. It's a standard mount, but what I really like is the location of it. Many of the mirrorless cameras will tend to place this in the middle, right here, which means if you were to put a tripod plate on the camera, and it was here in the middle, you see that that covers up your battery door, and that often happens with mirrorless cameras. So I like that they put the tripod mount right there, centered with the lens, so whenever you put your tripod mount on, you have access to your memory card and battery right there. You don't really have to mess with it. Now, I will say that, you know, I like keeping the tripod plates on my DSLRs, but if you were to do that in this, it does not affect the screen tilting unless you want to tilt the screen down, and then you don't have the full range of motion going down. It stops it there. And that may seem like a strange thing to point out, but I know a lot of landscape photographers that would really like that. Alright, now let's talk about battery life. Now, one thing that I've noticed with all mirrorless cameras is that it is kind of hard to get a lot of shots because, I mean, let's face it, these things are compact. These batteries aren't really big enough to pack a whole lot of punch. This particular battery is rated for 2 hours and 40 minutes of video and 320 photos. Now, I've purchased additional batteries as well as additional chargers, like I do for all my cameras, but I will say that I have not run out of battery yet with this and have not had to change it out. The reason for this is because the charger here on the side is the pretty standard micro USB, which I already have in my car set up. So I step in my car, I set this thing down below my center console, plug the micro USB in, and then it's always charging. I keep it with me all the time, and it's always ready to go, and I've never run into any battery problems thus far. Now, also next to the micro USB port, you'll see that it has the mini HDMI port, which is pretty standard for any cameras nowadays, so it's good that it has that. Now, before we wrap up this review, I want to talk about one thing that really surprised me about this camera and just Samsung in general, is the fact that you can get 3D video and pictures with this camera equipped with Samsung's 45mm 1.8 2D 3D lens. This lens can switch from 2D to 3D. Sounds like witchcraft to me, but somehow you switch it, it cuts the image in half and shoots 1080p at 30 frames per second instead of 60, and that gives you full HD 3D video, which is, I mean, $400 camera doing all, I mean, it just blows my mind. And you know, I was under the impression that you need 2 separate lenses to do that kind of thing, but you know, Samsung and their wizardry have figured it out, so it's pretty impressive. Alright, so we've pretty much talked about everything I can think to talk about on this camera. So, what are my final thoughts? They're probably the same as yours. Why the heck didn't anyone tell me about this thing? I mean, at the price point this thing's at, I challenge anybody to find me anything in this price range that can compete with this camera. And just because it's not a Sony or an Olympus or a Fuji does not mean that it's not good. Samsung is a world leader in electronics, and it was just a matter of time before they got into the camera game, and now they have in a really big way. I love this little thing, and I'm extremely satisfied with my purchase. And as you can tell, there wasn't much I could put against it. The only few things were lack of a viewfinder, no external audio input, and you know, I don't even remember if there was anything else, to be honest with you. All of those negatives were far outweighed by the positives that I found in this thing, especially at the price point. The resolution is there, the quality is there, the depth of field is there. I mean, it is all there. So obviously, I bought this thing, I'm not gonna send it back. So I would definitely recommend it for you. And I really highly doubt that you could be unsatisfied with it. So like I said earlier, I'm going to put the lowest price point I can find. I think right now is $399 for this camera, 20 to 50mm lens. I think it's on Amazon, so I'll put that in the description box below the video. Anyways, thanks for your time, everybody. Love you, bye.